Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. We are back with another live show which is focusing on trade and commerce. And today we are very excited to discuss the amazing and the most demanded conversation everywhere on the television, on the media, or on the Facebook and social digital platforms. That's more about interest rates and mortgages, anything that affects the commercial activity or it affects the individuals is always a great importance for a fiscal policy and the part of the monetary policy. Imagine that during the COVID, when things were really bad and the property value was really down, and at that time, if someone bought the property and had a 20-year mortgage on a floating rate was really low. But now with Bank of England increase 0.5% base rate. So now the base rate in England is 3.5%. 3.5% used to be a rate which include the base and the premium of any bank. Even it was lower. So if your mortgage was for 2 years and now you have to renew it on 6 to 8% mortgage rate, yeah, I know your heart is sad and you are worried. You want to sell your property because you can't afford this increment of interest rates, and you want to get rid of this property, but this property is also getting depreciated. The value of the property, first of all, no one is buying the property. The reason is that most of the property people buy to let is on the mortgage cycle. But if the mortgage rates are getting higher, it's causing the mortgage industry a very serious issues. And obviously, demand and supply is also impacting, and people are in deep trouble. In this interest rates increment, it's not only in United Kingdom. In some countries, we saw they have become triple, double, based on how effective the country monetary policy is. Now, in terms of mortgage prices, the rates are tremendously difficult. So we will go to Australia in Sydney live with our economist Imran, who is going to join us and discuss the interest rates and mortgage uh, hot burning issues in Australia, how the Australian government is taking care of this rising interest rates and mortgage markets. Please welcome.
Thank you so much, Musa, and thank you once again for the warm welcome and good morning to the listeners and viewers from Sydney, Australia. Yes, like you have explained, this is definitely and actually a very hot and everybody's, what you can say, word of mouth topic: rising interest rate and the mortgage stress. And this is something which is very important to discuss these days because you know that in the Western economic system, mortgage has played a very important role and always going to be a very important element in factor in the society. If we can see historically, and most of us remember back in 2008 when global financial crisis CFC hits, the main reason for that financial crisis was the mortgage ban, which happened in United States and then eventually leads all over around the world. Now, coming to the point of rising interest rate in Australia and mortgage stress in Australia, definitely this is a very hot topic here as well. Um, and when we look toward the interest rate, we don't have any, what you can say, clear witnessing of the rising interest rate prior to 2022 in Australia, at least for the last one decade or 11 years to my knowledge, because once after the GFC back in 2008, nobody has seen the interest rate has gone up. Whenever we have seen the movement in the interest rate, it is always towards the downward side. And always the government and the Reserve Bank of Australia, who is very independent, and government has nothing to do with the working of the Reserve Bank of Australia in terms of any monitoring or suggesting the policy, because Reserve Bank of Australia is quite independent. So, in saying, Reserve Bank of Australia has a complete control on the monetary policy and on the interest rate structure in Australia. And when we say that the interest rate and the rising interest rate, it is basically managed by the Reserve Bank of Australia through the cash rate target. And this is what we can say a very conventional monetary policy tool, which different reserve banks around the world will use by controlling the cash reserve rate. And as you know that Musa, cash reserve rate is always a rate of lending between different commercial banks when they use the exchange accounts which they have with the Reserve Bank. And this is how the system work in the Western markets. So this is the cash. The cash rate actually determines where the banks can actually borrow and lend the money uh, at the cash rate, which is set it by the Reserve Bank. And when the interest rate will go up, obviously the cost of borrowing for the commercial banks will go up, and they will transfer that pressure to the household, those who are the majority of the consumer and customers of those commercial bank in terms of the different types of the mortgage, and most of them are the household mortgages. Some of them have the business or commercial mortgages as well. So definitely, when interest rate will go up, the household mortgages will go up as well. Now, coming to some historical facts, and when we move toward the historical facts, I have some facts and figures as well, which will support my discussion today. How the interest rate increase in the recent past in Australia has an impact on the mortgages which household have today, and what would happen, and where we are heading, and how it will affect the whole environment in the coming years as well. Coming to that point, first of all, in the last 11 years, we haven't seen that interest rate is going up. Interest rate was always the case when it's coming down. So people have easy accessibility to the liquidity because of the low interest rate. And in the recent past, I was reading the data from the NAB business survey. And obviously the NAB stands for National Australia Bank here. More than 1.5 million homeowners have never expected the increase in interest rate in the last 5 years, especially. And the average mortgage size in Australia is $500,000 at the moment. So when we talk about the interest rate increase, any 0.25 percentage increase in the interest rate can actually add up an extra $65 a month for an average family. And if we look toward the interest rate today, it is sitting at 3.1 percentage. I'm talking about the cash reserve rate of Reserve Bank of Australia. So that was sitting before this cycle of increasing interest rate at 0.10, just a 10 basis point. Now today it is sitting at 310 basis points. So there is a tremendous increase in the last 8 meetings of the Reserve Bank of Australia, where they have increased the interest rate from zero point 0.1 to 3.1 percentage. What does it mean, and how does it affect the family? So when 0.25% increase on an average mortgage of $500,000 have an impact of $65 a month, then 3% increase actually have an impact of $807 a month. So the families are paying extra $807 a month on the similar mortgage which they were paying before this increasing cycle of the interest rate. And that has actually put most of the mortgage holder under stress as well. Another economic report conducted by the Reserve Bank of Australia through its different policy partners, the two big cities of Australia, Sydney and Melbourne. Obviously, the average median prices of the house in these two big cities are also very high, and they have witnessed quite a commendable growth in the recent 10 years. These cities have grown up so huge, and because of the high number of immigrations, high number of the overseas students coming into these cities. So obviously the size of cities has gone up as well. New constructions of dwellings and houses has gone up there as well. And now those areas, especially in the southwest of Sydney and northwest of Sydney, which has a new developments, the mortgage stress level has gone up to 76% in those areas. And similarly, when we talk about the Melbourne, in the new developed suburbs of the Melbourne, the outskirts, is also the mortgage having a mortgage stress level of 72%. So what does it mean when we talk about the mortgage stress level? It means actually about those families, those who don't have enough savings in their repayments, and they don't have an extra savings in their mortgage repayment. So they are just meeting their mortgage repayments on month to month basis. Any increase in the interest rate for the mortgage, or the interest rate on the mortgage by the provider or the bank, have a crucial impact on their budget as well. Because like I said in the beginning, that $500,000 is the average mortgage size, and any 0.25% increase has a $65 impact. So these families, those who are just meeting their payment to payment because they are so tight in their household budget, they are so tight in the earning and spending, they have not that leverage of that extra burden in their repayments. So most of the household are under a significant pressure on this part. When we talk about the mortgage stress level, it is also very important to understand, and also very important to find out the point where this whole thing has actually started. So just before the pandemic in 2019 and 2020, when the prices of the property market and houses started rising really high, and we haven't seen that sort of tremendous increase in the prices in the recent past. What we have seen, most of the new home loans or the purchase of the properties done by the first home owner buyer, which wasn't in the mortgage life before that. And one of the report by the National Australia Bank against showing the fact that 50% of the home loans taken at that time or in the last 5 years was under the fixed rate band, and most of the interest rates at that time offered under the fixed rate was historically very low. Normally, because at that time the interest rate or the cash reserve rate by the RBA was sitting at historically low level. So the most of the commercial bank offering the fixed interest rate at that time to attract more customers, to attract more consumers, they took the mortgages under 3 years, 4 years, and 5 years fixed interest rate. Now, those mortgages or those home loans which were taken at that point are coming to the maturity of the fixed interest rates. So when we're going to see that those fixed interest rate will expire, some of them actually expired in 2022, and the sum of them is going to expire in this 2023, and similarly in 2024. Those people, those who were having this as a first mortgage of their life, they haven't witnessed the increase in the interest rate. When they will be coming out of the fixed interest rate, they will be going back into the market of the banking system, and then they have to face the high interest rate, which at that time, because in today's market, remember the cash reserve rate of Australia is 3.5%, 3.1%, my apologies, 3.1%, which used to be 0.1% when those mortgages were started. So definitely there is going to be a significant impact on the mortgages here. And at the same time, what we have seen that interest rate by the RBA, the cash interest rate is 3.1%. This is one of the highest rate in the last 10 years. Let me put it this way, because the main reason behind this high cash interest rate or the cash reserve rate is the inflation factor which RBA is facing. As we know that most of the times RBA has in their monetary policy recommended the fact that inflation needs to be between the band of 2% to 3%. However, we haven't seen the inflation to go out of that band in the last many years. But surprisingly and quite unusually, after pandemic, when people have a lot of savings and all the government, and especially in Australia, government was running the expansionary fiscal policy where low taxation and high handouts were given to the families and household. The extra saving and extra spending has actually put pressure on inflation. And at the same time, disturbing factors in the global supply chain, the shortage of the labor because of the COVID lockdowns, restrictions on the mobility of the workers, and border closures once again has created the shortage of the labor in Australia as well. Australia is heavily reliant on the imported commodities for the daily consumptions, and especially from China. And once again, the COVID-19 factor has impacted a lot of delays in the supply chain, and supply and provision of those commodities will actually act as a source of ignition on that inflation factor. Now, that inflation, which we haven't witnessed anywhere more than 2 to 3% in the recent few years, now we have seen by the end of November 2022, the Australian Bureau of Statistics, the inflation was sitting at 7.1%. So where we were talking about inflation between 2 to 3%, now it's they are predicting it's going to be 7.75% by the end of December 2022. So there is a complete difference in that scenario, and this is where RBA has used its conventional monetary policy tool of increasing the interest rate. So the reason why I highlighted this factor, there's a lot of different factors. There is a pandemic, there is a climate change factor, floods and natural disasters, especially in Australia. In the recent few years, we have seen bushfires, which we haven't seen in the past. We have seen floods, which we haven't seen in the past few decades, and we have witnessed the floods, multiple floods in a year, which we haven't seen in the past generation. So these are the events which I think definitely impacted the inflation and the consumer price index in Australia. And it is once again going to evidence this fact that Reserve Bank of Australia is not in the near future looking to ease the monetary policy. They are going to tighten the monetary policy. This environment of the high cash reserve rate is going to be there, which means that the high interest rate on the mortgages, the household on the mortgage, they have to face that one at least for the next couple of years. And it will have a significant impact on the market. Now coming to my conclusion and as a suggestions, anyone in Australia, those who are looking to enter into the household, into the house mortgage, or looking to have their first home as a mortgage, I probably would consider or suggest this fact that they need to make sure that they are ready for the worst case scenario. So they need to factor in this fact that they can pay and what they cannot pay. So by having or by in saying that they need to work out what is the maximum they can pay on their mortgage, and they don't look or they don't have to stretch to that point where they can actually cannot afford any mortgage, because in near future interest rate is not going to go down, it's going to be there. There is a great possibility that we can witness another 2 or 3 interest rate hikes in 2023 once we see that where the Reserve Bank is going to stabilize their monetary policy. Because also remember, Musa, very important thing, whenever the Reserve Bank use the conventional monetary policy tool, which is increasing the reserve rate, it will not bring the effect in the market straight away. So if one interest rate jump of 0.25 percentage or 25 basis point, it effects actually start coming into the market after 2 to 3 months, because whenever the interest cash reserve rate will go up, the commercial bank will pass on to the customer in the following month, and obviously people have some savings, then the real impact of that increase will hit the people's pocket maybe in 2 to 3 months. And that when that impact hit the people's pocket, then it will change their spending habits, because ultimately the goal of the Reserve Bank is to change the people's spending habits so that they can cover or tackle the problem of the inflation. And like I said, there is going to be a tough time. It is already a very tough time, but we're going to face a tough time, especially this 2023. Yes, Musa.
So, Imran, it was really insightful and very interesting. And I can see that these points that you raised are very important for fiscal and monetary consideration. And as we learned from the United States mortgage balloon burst 2007 and 8, that it's very important that the regulators keep a great eye on the mortgage companies and try to protect the financial interest of the consumers, because the normal citizen who is into mortgage is the sufferer for all these things. And obviously the commercial properties are also part of our consideration. Sometimes we definitely see that the Fed or Bank of England or RBS, these old banks are trying to protect through rising interest rates, but it's sometimes not that effective as it looks apparently, because each sector behave in a different way. People want home, they can't live for long without home, so there is a demand for the mortgage, there is a demand for homes. So if a proper fiscal policy deploys where you are continuously measuring that how many homes are required every year, so this speculation in a mortgage industry or home market can be very rightly avoided. So what I always felt is the problem is with the utilization of the resources and planning and capability to take effective decisions and commit your resources in order to handle the mortgage and the homes or interest rates in the most effective way. With this, ladies and gentlemen, I want to thank you for joining us today, and we will join you in the next show with a new topic of a high value interest. Till then, you take care of yourself and the people around you. Good night and goodbye.